During the past 40 years, Asia's remarkable economic progress has generated global admiration. Our most recent key economic indicators show that Asia's share of global GDP in purchasing power parity basis has increased from around 15% in the early 1950s to around 38% in 2013. This transformation has been driven by productivity growth and underpinned by technological, policy, and organizational innovations. With the region's unprecedented growth, performance, and successful poverty reduction, there is ample reason for optimism for the future. But we also face daunting challenges such as persistent poverty, growing income inequality, climate-induced natural disasters, and intense competition for natural resources. Some countries risk falling into the middle-income trap. Responding to these challenges require innovative policies to adapt quickly to shifting conditions. Finally, the region needs to address overarching challenge of weak governance. Innovation has been and must remain a crucial element in driving Asia's progress. In my view, innovation comes from advanced technology, better designed policies, and improved education and training. As a region's premier development institution, for us to stay relevant to the region, it is imperative that we become increasingly innovative ourselves. Allow me to highlight some of the actions that ADB will introduce to promote innovation and learning. First, to ensure that we better capture tacit knowledge in the operational departments, we commit to strengthening the role of our 15 communities of practice, which are gathering of experts in the areas such as energy, transportation, health, and governance. Second, we agreed to introduce staff incentives for innovation and risk-taking. In relation to this, I think it is important that independent evaluation department finds ways to acknowledge innovative projects, even when they do not score high on the traditional evaluation indicators. Third, we approved the development of a bank-wide ICT knowledge-sharing platform that will allow for easy uploading and retrieval of knowledge products. Fourth, we are improving procedures to support better and timely project implementation. ADB's procurement system will be reformed and rationalized. Fifth, in the areas of knowledge work, ADB will introduce more flexible arrangements to promote partnerships with and between knowledge institutions in the region. With these initial thoughts, I wish you a successful conference and look forward to our exchange in this session. Thank you very much.
I want to share with you two key lessons of experience from the World Bank, if I may. The first message I would like to share is that learning and innovation, and to this I would add collaboration, learning, innovation, and collaboration are not just nice add-ons or bells and whistles to what we do day to day in our operational work. Learning, innovation, and collaboration are the key accelerators we feel in the fight to end poverty that President Nakao talked about. And they are central rather than incidental to our development effectiveness. My second message is that it is possible for us to introduce very concrete incentives and measures to make learning and innovation and collaboration central to our institutional DNA. So if you think about it, I can certainly speak for the World Bank that our traditional operating model in the World Bank traditionally has focused on the provision of finance. And our institutional culture, internal culture, has been driven with meeting volume-based lending targets rather than developmental impact. Now, there are limits to that kind of a institutional culture and that kind of a volume-driven push. So the central point here is that finance alone will not enable us to meet these lofty targets, which we must meet. And the key point is, it's finance that is bundled or combined with learning, innovation, and collaboration. It's not one or the other. It's finance that's combined with learning, innovation, and collaboration that can be the key accelerators. And even in a finance-constrained world, innovation, learning, and collaboration can be scaled up with the existing finances. And this is why the role of evaluation is so central, because it helps us learn what works and what doesn't work. If we are going to achieve these ambitious goals and the challenges that the poor face, when you look at the actual challenges country by country, they require innovative solutions that have not been tried and tested. And so we are experimenting with new platforms to crowdsource, very similar to what President Nakao just said, to crowdsource innovative solutions through competitions and challenges. We are incubating, testing, adapting, and scaling innovations like geomapping, like citizen-based feedback using mobile phones on whether teachers and textbooks are showing up in school. These are the transformational innovations that can have a transformational impact in the lives of the poor. But this also means that the role of evaluation will need to be more flexible and responsive in ensuring that it allows for this experimentation and adaptation. If you focus on the most important challenges, they require collaborative action by government, private sector, civil society. It's not a single sector approach, single stakeholder approach. So let me close by just saying that I really feel that going forward, we need to put in very concrete measures, systems, and incentives to make learning, innovation, and collaboration central to our institutional DNA. This is not a nicety, it is a necessity. Thank you.
Does ADB fit the traditional development institution mold? I would say quite strongly that it's working hard to break the mold. And the immediate opportunity before us is trying to help identify specific actionable measures the institution can take to break the mold. So in terms of project design and implementation, the status quo is lots of advanced planning followed by a planned script that can be implemented exactly as designed. In short, the implementation of best practice solutions. The innovative approach, however, would be to break the divide between planning and implementation. So projects would be viewed as experiments or pilots, which involve an incremental process of trial and error. And this requires an authorizing environment that encourages innovative decision-making, risk-taking, and what I would call positive deviance. So not a control culture. Secondly, on monitoring. The status quo is traditional monitoring. We have short loops focused on process compliance and accountability, followed by evaluation, fairly long loops on outputs, maybe outcomes. The innovative approach, however, would embed experimentation in short, tight feedback loops that facilitate rapid understanding of how solutions are working in an immediate sense so that the feedback loops are integrated into project design mid-course. Turning to evaluation and learning, the status quo is we learn top-down. The head learns and leads. The rest listens and follows. There are long lead times in learning from traditional ex-post evaluations, but the innovative approach is quite different. The innovative approach is about diffusion of learning and innovation throughout the institution. So knowledge flows from the bottom up. The operational staff are authorized to conduct their own initiatives and their own experiments. a few words specifically on what we need for monitoring and evaluation in this brave, new, innovative world. What I think we need to introduce to the uppercase M and the uppercase E is the small lowercase e, which would be experimental learning. And the goal would be to bring the informal process of experimental learning from project implementation explicitly into the overall strategy of development institutions, drawing intermediate learning that can be fed back into design during the course of the project cycle. And I think that this approach would help relieve the tension that we see sometimes between agencies wanting, needing, having to innovate, and shareholders' need for rigorous evidence of effectiveness, which create, and therefore creating some space for failure, which is so important. And so in this brave, new, innovative world, we would apply perhaps capital M, lowercase e, capital E in this way. Capital M for perfectly routine projects. We just need good monitoring. Capital M, lowercase e for innovative projects, for pilots. Capital M, capital E for mature projects, where we already know that the design is going to solve certain kinds of solutions, certain kinds of problems, and we're sort of scaling these projects. And then we need capital M, lowercase e, and uppercase e, all three, for complex projects that have many components. So we don't need to have the same approach for all kinds of projects. When staff hear from their leadership, take more risks, innovate, it's okay, I think words are not sufficient. They need to have a firm sense that management will have their back if something goes wrong, and then management needs to have a real sense that shareholders will have their back if something goes wrong. Now, the source of why things go wrong matters, right? So if it's pure laziness and, sorry to say, incompetence, that's a different story. If it's trying something new because we actually, in our role as development workers, are trying to find new solutions, because by definition, if we had the solutions, this world would be a better place already, then we can allow for failure.
What we are doing is we're trying to develop an innovation portfolio, a portfolio of innovations that have tried and tested things, but that have more transformational, innovative things, that have early stage innovations, proven innovations, and so on. And you develop a risk appetite, risk return appetite for scaling innovations. I think it requires developing an appetite for failure. We are doing failure fairs in the World Bank. The President Jim Kim actually convened a major town hall where we actually featured projects that failed, not with a sense of punitive action, but with a sense of learning from failure.
It's easy to say that we should be more innovative, we should be more transparent, accountable, and so on. We should, of course, target outcome instead of input. It's easy to say that, but how to incentivize people? Of course, the first thing the manager or the leader of an institution should do is try to think how to change things better. So if it is just to do things business as usual, we don't need a president in a sense. So I'm from the Ministry of Finance, which is regarded more traditional at the Ministry of, in Japan, but I really hate bureaucracy because we should support people, and why do we do these kind of things just for the sake of doing business as usual? Unless we try to change things to better, there is no reason that the senior officials are there. So senior officials and leaders and managers should always think about in a more innovative way to look at the outcome. That is the most important element. Unless we change, as I said earlier, there is no reason for the managers to stay there, and there is no reason for the institution to be there. So in that regard, we need a guidance from shareholders, board members, and also we need a guidance from independent evaluation departments, and we also need a guidance from citizens and civil society organizations.
How do we reconcile innovation, collaboration, learning in the DNA with a governance structure which may be risk averse, which is finance or banking oriented and so on. I think our shareholders gave our goal not to be a bank. Our goal was to eradicate poverty. And that is an inherently risky business, right? So whatever the mindset of individual shareholders or the institutions or the ministries they represent, the reality is collectively our governance structure, our shareholders, asked us to try to eradicate poverty. And that is a risky business. Things are not known, answers are not known, you need experimentation. The biggest risk is not the fiduciary risk, it's not the safeguard risk, it's the risk of not achieving development results. We forget that, that's the main risk.
People want to do things as usual because they don't want to be bothered by new ideas, new things. It's easier for anyone to do the same things. So to me, it's not really a risk. The risk is that we continue to do the same things without thinking about it. So risk is not about the people affected by the projects. We have a very strict safeguard policies about environmental impact and also social impact. So relocation of people affected by the project, we should really pay attention to the impact for those peoples. And we should compensate those peoples well. But at the same time, risk is not doing things, not implementing project afraid of those disputes. They built the railway in the United States between the East and the West. There were so many affected people, but if they were just afraid of those impacts, they couldn't develop railways. They couldn't develop.
I think paralysis is risk. Fear is a risk. Now, fear of failure is a huge risk to development. Repeating the same failures over and over again is a real risk to development.
We are finding that for a lot of these complex problems, you indeed need the kind of approach that Alexia was talking about, which is you're testing, you're trying, how do you tackle climate change? How do you tackle corruption and procurement? You really don't know, there's no textbook. So you start, you experiment, you do mid-course correction. We're doing a lot with beneficiary feedback using mobile phones, finding out from citizens. So it allows you to course correct. So it's rather amplifying the voices of the poor rather than suppressing it.
I really believe the private sector is locomotive of growth and development. Government alone cannot implement the growth and development. But government has a very important role of setting the vision and also build the infrastructure and to do a lot of public goods kind of things. About PPP, we should use more private sector money to the infrastructure. But PPP should not be regarded as a panacea, the way to mobilize resources off the budget. It shouldn't be regarded a kind of a way to finance infrastructure without asking the taxpayers' money, because it involves a lot of risk for the future. Incompletions of the projects, or more money needed from the government to support it. So PPP should be regarded as a way to do things more efficiently, to promote ideas of private sector's innovations and innovative ideas, more efficient way of doing things.
We are right now focusing in every country on the biggest challenges to poverty eradication. And when you look at the biggest challenges, whether it's power sector or whatever the problems are, invariably it requires not only a prominent role of the private sector, but a prominent role of government, private sector, and civil society. That's why I think the new frontier is not government versus private sector, it's collaborative action amongst the three. A lot of our conversation has been focused on internal knowledge sharing. I think the real knowledge resides outside our institutions, increasingly in mix. And one of the most exciting initiatives we are working on is to promote knowledge hubs within mix, within developing countries, that become centers of excellence to share their knowledge and innovation externally. Alexia.
Look up human-centered design. There's a really great example in the private sector of design thinking, how you actually break the distance between someone sitting in their office trying to innovate in terms of a new product or a new service, and the consumer. To actually go next to the consumer, to live with the consumer, to observe their daily life, to understand how you can actually, what are their needs that they might not be able to express if you said, what is your need? But by observing the consumer, by living with the consumer, you start to understand, and then you design around that consumer need, human-centered design. There's a lot written about it. It's one example of how to really reduce the space between those of us who are trying to work on behalf of people and what those people's needs are, and how to iterate quickly around service delivery innovation. Thank you.
If I had to just also underscore one point that all the three panelists mentioned on a critical question of innovation and risk, it really needs to be how do we put together things so that you get better social and environmental outcomes and reduction in poverty, not worse. So can I just unambiguously state that on behalf of all of us? That is the understanding, at least the broad framework of innovation and risk to achieve that. One more thing, on evaluation, there is even a suggestion. Why not go to the communities to use as the basis source of the evaluative evidence more directly? Great idea. I mean, this is an agenda for the future. So at least complement that approach with everything else we do. So tribute to the questions and the commentaries. A very, very special thanks to the star-studded panel who just did wonderfully.